Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of The Damage Report here under lockdown. It is a big news day, so it makes sense that we're joined by someone big on the news. Michael Shure, how's it going?
It's going well. You know, as a lifelong Genesis fan, I love your theme song. It's very Genesis-y, very sort of, new drum machine, synthesizer, Mellotron-y. Yeah, I like it.
I like that description of it better than JR, who always starts singing My Sharona, because apparently it shares a similar progression.
Oh, that's interesting.
Anyway,
it's not very knacky. It's more Genesis-y to me.
I'll take that. Well, very glad to have you here because it is a big news day. I mean, we're going to be talking about primary challenges. We're going to be talking about, chaos in the streets. There's so much that we aren't going to be talking about. I mean, you were just telling me before the show about these buildings being swept into the ocean by a landslide. We've got videos of brutality, in New York while Cuomo is saying the cops have never hit a peaceful protester with their batons. It's a chaotic country. And so I'm glad that we're able to touch base. If you have already joined the chat, as many of you have, please hit the like button. It lets people know that the stream is active, and you can, of course, engage with us in a variety of ways, including tweeting at us at hashtag TDR Live, commenting, super chats, and taking part in the conversation over at twitch.tv/TYT. Some people are already sending super chats. Matthias said your splash screen was prescient. So we have, it's sort of like a joke, is that our branding for the show is the White House is on fire and everything's chaotic.
Right.
It now seems like a bit of an understatement, but anyway,
reporting the damage, John, and
exactly.
That's right in the title.
That's what we're doing. By the way, William Emerson sent in a Snapchat, a super chat saying, "We love epic politics, man."
Oh, so, thank you, William. It's nice to hear. Nice to hear early,
Exactly. Rob Shively says, "I understand the Genesis love, but I think I've always been more of an SNES fan." Me too, actually, growing up. Anyway, that was fun. But we have a lot to get to, and we want to fit it all in. So, Michael, why don't we jump right to the news?
Yes.
New York could have another exciting primary battle brewing in the very near future. We've got Eliot Engel, current incumbent, caught on a hot mic, appearing at an event to talk about what's been going on in the country and maybe revealing a bit more than he intended to.
Then I didn't go down the list, and it's just too many folks here.
I didn't have a primary when you here.
Say that again?
I didn't have a primary when you here.
Don't do that to me. We're not going to do this. Then I got to
Okay, so, Michael, what do you think? I mean, showing up during two simultaneous crises and implying, I wouldn't even be here if I didn't have to pretend.
Yeah. He thinks that that's funny, and therein lies the disconnect. And in a tongue-in-cheek way, that's something you could say to your staffer and say, if I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't have to be dealing with this right now, because members of Congress do not like getting primaried. It's a hassle. It's a lot of money to spend. They're going to have to spend on a general election. Generally speaking, it's very difficult to raise money as an incumbent member of Congress who does not have a close race, but you have to then go out and raise money for a primary. But again, this is what people are talking to when they say that there is a lackadaisical, a disinterested, an older generation of politicians whose time has come, and that's why they primary within the party. I'm not always in favor of it just to do it, but this is a case where you understand that there is an entrenchment that is really just too strong.
So you believe he is joking there? That he's not being I'm just so frustrated. I come all the way out here, and now you're saying I can't speak, or I can't speak for as long as I want.
I think that listen, I think he means it, but I also think that there is some tongue-in-cheekness to it when he says it. And I'm not just giving Eliot Engel the benefit of the doubt. I don't know anything Eliot Engel, but I do know that people speak in that way. That there's, I wouldn't have slept all the way out here if I didn't have to. And now I'm not even getting a chance to speak. So I think there was a little annoyance, but I also think that has been sort of a thematic way of talking about these things among many members of Congress. And I don't mean to joke like you're going to be rolling on the floor laughing, but it's like, John.
I was not.
Yeah. No, but I mean, that's not that kind of joke that I'm saying.
I get what you're saying. Jamaal Bowman certainly wasn't. He tweeted in response to this, this is incredibly painful to watch from Representative Eliot Engel. It hurts. We need to be taking care of our communities right now, whether it's election season or not. It's clear that we need new leadership in New York 16. And exciting news coming out last night with popular politician in the region, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, saying this moment requires renewed and revitalized leadership across the country and at the ballot box. She's going to have new endorsements coming out tomorrow, but as of last night, she's endorsing Jamaal Bowman. And so,
and she's not just popular congresswoman. She's now a colleague of Eliot Engel. So that makes it even bigger. But... Yeah, no, I know, but I think it's important to underscore that for precisely the same reasons I was just talking about. She is saying we don't need this sort of tired leadership. Yeah. And she's a colleague. She is part of the same, not just a colleague in Congress. She is a part of the same state delegation. These sorts of things are usually unprecedented. You don't see it very often. And I think especially with someone in leadership in terms of a committee chairman. So I do think it's important to talk about the political story behind this, not just the campaign story, because it really does matter.
Yeah, it is rare. I mean, it's making big news because she doesn't do tons and tons of endorsements, and certainly not against incumbent Democrats. But I mean, we should point out that while it is very rare, it's not necessarily the case that it needs to be very rare. This is a primary. She's not endorsing a Republican challenger to Eliot Engel. She has no obligation to pretend that simply because someone else shares a party label with her that they are fundamentally the same on a wide range of issues, particularly in this case, foreign policy with Eliot Engel. Jamaal Bowman is much more closely ideologically aligned with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And while she wants Democrats to outnumber Republicans, she also wants more people like her inside of the Democratic caucus. And you're not going to get that if you simply accept that anyone who's already in a position that it's entirely illegitimate to ever challenge that. And so I'm glad that selectively, she's not just willy-nilly, endorsing literally anyone. She's choosing her battles. But this one, particularly with Bowman raising a lot of money recently, it seems like a possible win for progressives coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah, it does, and I think it's really important what you just said too, John, is that it doesn't have to be that way. But this is just the kind of old guard politician that you would have thought would have sort of not taken. And I don't know this to be fact, so I'm speaking extemporaneously here, guessing that he fits the mold, Eliot Engel, of the type of politician that didn't take Ocasio-Cortez as seriously as some of the others did. He said, "Oh, this is just a fad in politics right now." So it would stand to reason that that's the type of politician she would stand up to, but she is standing up to on the grounds that she really does agree with Bowman more than she would with Engel. And it is a brave thing to do for Ocasio-Cortez, too. I mean, it's not easy going against your party at whoever it is. Republicans found it with Steve King, though some of them did finally do that. And he is the most obviously out there polar opposite of everyone in Congress, or most people in Congress.
Yeah, and it's a weird move by AOC considering that she's just, she just does whatever Nancy Pelosi wants, and she's learned to play the game, and she's been beaten down by the machine on the inside, and she was fake the whole time. Oh, sorry, I've been reading too many editorials, I think. But anyway, it's a good move. And by the way, if anyone watching this would like to see a little bit more of Jamaal Bowman and his platform, he's been on the Damage Report a couple of times, including just a few weeks ago in the run-up to this primary, so that is available on the channel if you'd like to take a look. With that, let's see what's going on out in the community. AJ Duenas, thank you. Justin Matthews says, "Happy Thursday, my dudes. Vegas is open."
Yes.
That's exciting. I mean, the thing is, it might seem like, well, who would possibly go? But these are people who like to gamble. So...
Right.
It seems like it might work.
So I'll start with me, and also the Republicans. It looks like that's one of the places they're looking at for their possible convention to move from Charlotte to Las Vegas.
Yeah, that or literally any city that can take them and house them. But yeah, I have heard they're going.
It's Orlando and Nashville. Las Vegas does have the bigger spaces in which to socially distance, though. So
yeah,
maybe
that's true.
Point.
By the way, I was reading really fast. I was reading this article about the future of movie theaters. And I forget which one it was. I think it was Cinemark, but please just check it yourself. They rolled out their plan for how they're going to get people back in soon. And it was like $5 tickets and masks aren't required. Like the idea being, well, you don't have to sit there for 2 hours with a mask on. But that also means that you're going to be sitting in a room with people who won't have their masks on. So
right. That seems ridiculous, yeah.
I guess they've done focus groups or something. I don't know.
Get people to go back to the movies. A vaccine.
Exactly. That would be great, actually. Yeah, roll that out.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Andy Rue had sent in a super chat. My Sharona. Damn you, but thank you. Gianna says, update. My mom is conservative, not Republican. She researched all points of conspiracy video after our talk. She called back to tell me it was BS success. Gianna, I'm glad to hear that. So Gianna had sent in a message yesterday that her mother had come with all of this conspiracy theorizing. And apparently, I had felt that there was very little hope of bringing someone back from the brink that believed some of these things. But apparently I was wrong. Jody says, with a very large super chat, says, I don't care if you're late sometimes. You're the best thing on the interwebs. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
That's nice, John.
That is very nice. Matt Rogers says, thanks, John. Me and my bullies love watching you. Hopefully you mean bulldogs.
Right.
Pipples? Hopefully people aren't bullying you in your living room.
Yeah. Maybe it's Michael Jordan.
Maybe. I get that.
Can't believe it.
I watched the whole series.
Right.
Kimberly says, love TDR when I can't sleep. It's 1:10 a.m. in Australia. Wow. And Nicola,
that's either good or bad. It's like, I love it when I can't sleep because it puts me to sleep, or
exactly, yeah.
I'm up and I get to watch it.
I don't know what the show's about, but the first 5 minutes just do exactly what they need to do.
Yeah.
And over on the hashtag TDR Live on Twitter, Gabby Marita had said, I realized I did it again, Gabby, says, yay, Michael Shure is here.
That's
John's
nice.
Cool too, I guess. I see it. Great. Anyway, okay, why don't we jump back into the news? You know what? Before we go to this next story, I'm gonna see, is it possible to play this? I'm gonna see. I'm not sure if it's really gonna be that legible. We might have to input it, but I got to. So really fast, we're gonna play a video from last night. Video is going viral this morning of an individual yelling at cops after his car had been shot at. He gets out and yells about the fact that his pregnant wife is in the vehicle, and take a look at how the cops respond.
Oh, my girlfriend in it? My pregnant fucking girlfriend in it? Are you fucking... What are you gonna do? Shoot my car? What are you gonna shoot my car? Give a fucking pepper ball? My girlfriend in it? My pregnant fucking girlfriend in it? Are you? Shoot it! Fuck you! You shot a car with a pregnant woman in it! With fucking tear gas! Fuck you! I ain't going nowhere! Fucking bitches! Fuck, shoot it again! She's fucking pregnant! Shoot it again! Are you... There's a pregnant woman in the car!
Okay, I wanted to play some of that because we can't show all of the videos that we see all the time. I mean, there's the video of the biker being chased down the street by cops trying to, hit him with clubs. But I want people to be reminded that this is weirdly casual violence. That the cops are just standing on the corner, the guy's yelling at him, so they light up his car. He's not doing anything, he's not a threat. They just light it up. And they know that all this is being filmed. This is day 4, day 5 of the protest. They've seen that all these acts end up getting out. And so they're doing it knowing that they'll be filmed and not caring, believing that they will be absolutely fine, that there will be no consequences. And I'm starting to wonder if there will be. I've seen a few cops that have been identified from particular videos that have been fired, but for the most part, the brutality doesn't seem to have any career consequences for them.
And these are the people that are so irate over the looting that seems to be going on, thinking, as if no one is watching, rampaging in the streets. They're decrying it at every turn. But it's actually no different at all. And it's worse because it's certainly far more violent than the looting that's going on. But it's happening in the same way. Those two stories are exactly alike. What the police are doing, thinking no one's watching because everyone is distracting, is the same thing as someone knocking the glass out of a window of a store and taking things out of it because nobody is watching.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a video of this like massive military truck that should not be deployed in the streets of the US. And they're yelling at protesters, "Move or you will be dead." Knowing that they're filmed, they don't care. There's a video going around this morning of a woman and the cop, it looks like, is groping her. He would probably say he was trying to restrain her. She, in response to her breasts being grabbed, fights free of the cop and then stands. Arms down, stands as she's surrounded by cops that begin beating her with billy clubs. She's not fighting back. She's not swinging her arms. She's not running.
Do you see what I mean? I mean, this is the exact same thing. They're doing what the looters are doing. They think nobody's watching, and even if someone is watching, they don't care that people are watching.
Yeah, yeah. These are protests around police brutality, and they seem to think, yeah, no, we should prove their point. Like they believe one of two things: that it's fine to turn gradually, day by day, virtually everyone against them, or they think that there's enough people out there that no matter how many videos of this sort of brutality you have, they will still be on the side of the cops. They seem to have made that decision. They're not the only ones. Trump and many other Republicans seem to have made the same decision. But then you have the misinformation around it. I mean, you know, the most popular cable news channel is Fox News. They're not going to acknowledge any of this. If you watch that for your news, you're not going to know any of this happens. And then you're going to have people like Governor Cuomo saying that this doesn't happen. Cops don't actually hit people with their clubs. So they get to cover their eyes and pretend that none of this is going on. Okay.
It's exasperating.
It is. And like I said, we can't show them all. It would be the whole show day after day. But some of them, like, ugh. Anyway, let's move on to other news. Senator Tom Cotton had an op-ed recently you might have seen going around. Tom Cotton, send in the troops, in the New York Times. I read that it was on the 31st anniversary of Tiananmen Square. I could be wrong about that, but it seems appropriate. And that op-ed has generated a lot of controversy, reactions from people working at the New York Times, particularly when you understand who Tom Cotton is and what he has said about these protests already. So Tom Cotton had previously tweeted that whatever it takes to restore order should be done, no quarter for insurrectionists, anarchists, rioters, and looters. Now, of course, technically, no quarter means that we will not be taking prisoners. We will be killing people instead of taking them prisoner. He's a soldier, so one would think he'd know that. He tried to pretend afterward that that's not what he meant, but that is what that means. And you would expect that either a soldier or a senator or someone who is both would be a little bit more careful with their language. But I personally think that he was being careful with his language. I think he knows that his base loves that sort of talk. And so the same
they do, but I don't know that everybody understands that. I think a lot of people think it means no space. I will give no space to these people, but it does literally mean what you said, and he should have used better words than that because he knows, even if other people don't.
Yeah, and so you have Tom Cotton saying that. I don't know if that's better or worse than Matt Gaetz saying that now Antifa should be hunted down the way we hunt down Al-Qaeda. Take your pick. But neither of them have suffered any consequences. You can just imply that protesters should be murdered in the streets, and it's okay. Should we be using drones?
Gaetz got a warning on his tweet. He got a warning on his tweet. Is that
That's true. Oh, that's true. That's enough. We don't need anything more. And then he wore that as a badge of honor. His first, I would guess. But anyway, Tom Cotton had that op-ed where he calls for soldiers to be dispatched across America to put down these sorts of things. He has a comment in there, by the way, about the fact that America is not blind to injustice, but yada, yada, yada. What I noticed was in these tweets and in that op-ed, although we're not blind to injustice, he gave no acknowledgement of any of the virtue or value of any of these protests or the rage that's driving them. He acknowledged no need to reform the police that I saw. He had no legislation that he plans to put forward to make sure that these sorts of killings, like the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and a number of others, Ahmaud Arbery, there's developments on that story today, need to be changed. All he had, the only suggestion he had was to deploy soldiers to put down the protests. And a lot of people had a problem with that. We're going to have some of that in a second. But Michael, what do you think about all this?
It's tough. I'm not reflexively opposed to them printing this, but I've learned a little bit over the past day of reading what other people's reactions are to it. The op-ed is controlled by the op-ed editorial board. That's their job. It's divorced from the paper to some degree, but too many times people who already have a platform, you have to expect they get nearly 1,000 submissions every day to be on the op-ed page, and they give them too often to people.
Is that a guess? Do they really get 1,000 a day?
I would imagine they get between 500 and 1,000 every day. Wow. I don't know that, and that's something that that could probably be gotten from them. But they get hundreds, certainly. I know that because I know somebody who worked at the Times when I was trying to get something in myself once, and they said you don't have a shot. And I was in just after college, and but that was then. So I would imagine they get very many. The point though is that they give them too often to people who already have a platform. Tom Cotton has one in the Senate every day, and you kind of know his position. But on the First Amendment score, I think that it's important, to not pick and choose. At the same time, I think there are limits. I think that we all have this instinctive knowledge that fascism, as it's sort of laid out here without saying that word, is wrong. And what does the time gain? What does the Times gain by that? Also, Tom Cotton is a senator who is up and coming. He is presidential fodder when you ask Republicans about him. He also has the president's ear. And I think it's important to know what's going on, what's coming out of the mouth that has the president's ear. So I'm a little torn. I don't think the Times should have run it, but I also see what they're doing and why they did and what would have happened had they not run it. Had Tom Cotton, which doesn't matter to me, but it does matter to the Times. Had Tom Cotton said, I had this op-ed that the Times refused to run, here it is, and this is why the Times is bad, and this is why the media is bad. I sort of see they were in a tight spot too.
I get what you're saying. I have a feeling Tom Cotton will be saying that anyway. I don't think that...
He already has, like you said, John. He's been saying it, right? Yeah. This is nothing new. So I hear what you're saying.
Well,
but it's a prevailing sentiment, though. And there are people on that side of the argument that agree completely with Tom Cotton. Is it important to hear that? Yeah.
I get what you're saying. In terms of the, trying to not be seen as biased, it is a pointless war to engage in because the right doesn't care. They're not expressing an honest opinion that these sources are biased against them. They're gaming the refs. That's all it is. And so you're never going to appease them.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And in terms of I know he would complain if it hadn't been published, but it isn't like senators don't get op-eds published all the time. Was it Schatz, I think, he said, I submitted one on climate change, one on Medicare. They didn't print either of those. Right. He's a senator. Aren't we obligated to hear what he has to say? That's what a lot of people had said. But they didn't publish them because, as you point out, there are many possible submissions. They could have run an op-ed about the need to defund the police. Maybe they'll do that, especially now after this controversy. But they ran this.
I think also just to finish your thought there is that you have to listen to who was receiving it poorly, which I didn't do initially when I said, oh, they've got to print it. It's free press and yada yada. Black America feels like it endangers them, and I think the Times it has to listen to that and has to respect that, and that's maybe something they would do next time because of the outcry and because of what a sensitive time this is to print that. Maybe do it in 3 months. Looking back, I would have used Tom Cotton would have used military strength. I think it's not just easy to do this, but I've learned a lot from the reactions of Black America on this that it endangers them, and I don't think that's the Times' role at all.
Exactly. Yeah, they rightfully fear that if there are soldiers on the streets of perhaps New York specifically, we see what's happening, that the violence is extreme, that it is disproportionate, that it is distributed unequally based on the race of individuals. I mean, you've probably seen multiple videos of there were store owners, black store owners, who called the cops to help them with looters, and the store owners got arrested. In this particular case, I'm thinking of, they weren't beaten at least, but they were arrested. And so a number of employees of the Times are saying that. Here you have, I'll probably get in trouble for this, but to not say something would be immoral. As a black woman, as a journalist, as an American, I am deeply ashamed that we ran with this. Running this puts Black New York Times writers, editors, and other staff in danger. A number of employees had that same basic message. And the editorial page editor for New York Times responded with a thread. One of the tweets in that thread was, "We understand that many readers find Senator Cotton's argument painful, even dangerous. We believe that is one reason it requires public scrutiny and debate." And the thing is, it perhaps gets to be for him, maybe, I don't know, or for me, a sort of intellectual thing, the duking out of ideas, but it's not my life on the line. And
right.
So,
well, and that's what changed my mind too. I agree with you.
Yeah. So what? Yeah. I mean, Trump in his speech earlier this week made a reference to the Second Amendment. We know what he's saying. So if Tom Cotton's op-ed was, good patriotic white Americans need to arm themselves and protect their property, would they run that? And there has to be a line somewhere.
Yeah. And there has to be fact checking by the op-ed board too. I mean, because there were so many wrong proposals and
Yes.
pronouncements in that op-ed. And it should also be pointed out that James Bennett, who is the editorial page editor, is the brother of Senator Michael Bennett of Colorado. I think it's so there is a Senate connection there as well.
Interesting. See, that's what we need from you. And by the way, people are acknowledging that. On Twitch, Yupermeg says, "Michael does give perspective I usually don't think of. Annoying as it gets, though." But he does like having his horizons broadened there.
I'm not here to annoy. I've struggled with it myself, so I'm being honest about it. And if my conclusion is annoying, I can't help that. But I've concluded that they shouldn't have run it. But I see the merits on both sides.
Yeah, and I try to too. What's the point of discussing something like this if you only understand it from one perspective?
Yeah.
And why have two people do that? That seems fun. Anyway,
but I mean, we're also journalists and we're reporters, and there is something infringing upon it at its very core to say you shouldn't publish this. Mm-hmm. But it's also just an op-ed, and that's why I think fact checking it is a really important thing they need to do, because this was an irresponsible op-ed as well.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe look, my last op-ed that I submitted to The Hill was rejected. It was laying out all of the dangerous statements from Fox News that I believe increased the likelihood that coronavirus would spread. It was just references to things they'd said on air, and they didn't run it. And I'm still incredibly frustrated about that, because people, I know that we're not day-to-day paying a lot of attention to it, but more than 1,000 people died 2 days ago from coronavirus. About 1,000 died yesterday. It is still a very big deal, and that misinformation... Anyway, okay, on the Super Chats, Mr. Andy Rue, thank you for your Super Chat. Aaron Dettis said, "My Shrone equals one of the best guitar solos," obviously. Franklin Sharpslicer, who likes to do poetic Super Chats, says, "Whether it be dusk or dawn, we can do without Unca Dawn, who is a special spelunker because he hides so well in his bunker. He also has one in Jackson Hole. A bunker is a bunker, it's still a hole." I don't necessarily get the reference, but thank you for the Super Chat and the poem.
I do. I mean, it's Donald Trump hiding in his bunker. There's also supposedly one, there.
Oh, is there?
There are several bunkers around the country for when the president is traveling, and I think we did that on 9/11 too. So,
JD Wilder, thank you for the game over. Theron says, "Remember the Occupy Wall Street memes about the cops casually pepper spraying already restrained protesters?" Yeah. We've seen some of that. I saw a Vice correspondent just get laying face down on the pavement, getting sprayed in the face with pepper spray. Matt Rogers says, "Yes, John, I've got 2 English bulldogs. They want to know if your pup has an Instagram. They want to be friends." No, he appears on mine, but he does not have his own. I barely keep mine up. I can't keep it up for other species.
I'll quote that.
Oh, geez. Let's just move on. Anyway, okay, with that, why don't we move on to other news? The Republicans seem to believe that the only response to these protests is to have overwhelming force to dominate the streets, and we're seeing that happening right now. As of Monday morning, let alone today, 17,000 National Guard troops have been deployed to 23 states and Washington, D.C. No state has requested federal assistance, however, subverting the normal process for domestic military intervention. I expect that to be a trend that continues. And we know that earlier this week, there was a call leaked to the Washington Post where the Secretary of Defense told governors that the National Guard stands ready to assist and urge states to dominate the battle space of any protests that had turned violent. 3 unnamed Pentagon senior officials told the Daily Beast that despite this call, they had not expected the president to act on it. They said Esper spoke mainly as a show of support to the president and had not expected a further deployment of troops, which Michael brings to mind for me when the military brass gave Trump a bunch of different options for Iran, and they only put out the most extreme one to make the others seem more appealing, and then they were surprised by his choice. But anyway, Esper apparently didn't really mean it about dominating the battle space, and that looks like what they're doing, though.
Yeah, it's certainly what they've tried to do, and even as he's walked it back a little bit, Esper, the intent was clear, and I don't think anybody thinks that they were mincing words about that. And they got the words out that they wanted to use: battle space, protests turn violent. It's not the protests themselves that were turning violent, and the looting that came out of them was not related to the protests, nor was it at first anyway violent looting. It was destructive, and it was vandalizing, and it was terrible. But it had nothing to do with a battle space that they tried to frame. And, would this have happened if it were not an election year? I don't know, but I do think that there is some difference to the fact that that the president's up for election in less than 5 months now. So I think that you can't discount that.
And that theory could potentially explain this other turn. Trump has apparently asked for detailed information on the kinds of military vehicles, including tanks, that could be deployed, according to Pentagon officials speaking with the Daily Beast. But a senior administration official said this didn't necessarily mean Trump wanted to send tanks. The Beast reported, quote, "I think that's just one of the military words he knows," according to the official.
Oh my God.
Which is reassuring.
Right.
He doesn't mean tanks. It's just he sees a cat and he points and says puppy. That's just the word he knows.
Right.
Imagine being that. Imagine being a military official.
And also that there's nothing, even if forgetting the words, like the notion that he cares about it, he didn't mean that. Like he's just sitting around doing inventory. That's one of the things that he's taking control of.
He does inspections.
Yeah, right. I mean, come on.
Oh my God. And the thing is, like, okay, I'm sure you're comfortable, senior administration official, that he doesn't actually mean it. He's just using one of the 7 words he's mastered in the English language. Except that, how many times has Trump indicated that he wants tanks and rocket launchers at military parades? And we know that decades ago, he was talking glowingly about the Chinese crushing of the Tiananmen Square protests. Like that symbolic, iconic moment that we all understand what that one individual represents. All of us, except for Trump, who saw that as, hey, that guy has to get out of the way. That's an awesome parade. Move out of there, man.
And by the way, the tank did try and get out of the way of the guy, too. I mean, which is different than what we're seeing on the streets of the United States. So to the Chinese credit there, if you're going to give any, I mean, the whole idea was this evasion, which made it so compelling, was this lonely voice there. Yeah. But it wasn't like they just ran him. I mean, they didn't run him over with the tank.
Yeah. Yeah. I was predicting days ago that he's going to do it, at least in D.C. He's been horny for tanks in the streets this entire time. He's going to get it. They buzz the people with the helicopter. And look, at a certain point, this is just wordplay. I mean, you've seen some of the vehicles, I'm sure, that they're deploying. They're not technically main battle tanks, but it's basically the same thing. These are armored vehicles deployed against U.S. citizens. And so, but I would not be surprised if he was putting pressure on them to bring out even heavier hardware.
No, there's this, the old, a president at war is a president that's hard to defeat at the ballot box. And it just so happens this president's war is the one that he seems to fancy is here on his own soil. And so having this military presence in his mind, I am certain, he did not tell this to me, nor has anyone, but it's very easy to infer that this is part of the strategy here, is to be a president at war and to be right as far as the people that are going to support him would view it. So I think that's part of it as well. Yeah,
look, last thing on tanks for me, I obviously don't want any of this, because the more force that they put in the streets, the more violence ends up getting unleashed on peaceful protesters. But I also know that Trump has apparently for months now just been moonlighting as the star of Democratic ads. We're going to have an ad later on. He's just doing whatever it takes to make devastating campaign ads against him. So does he not get that if he puts tanks in the street, there are going to be tank man moments? That people aren't going to take the opportunity to stand in front of these tanks and force the tanks to make a decision. I mean, it's going to be like, it's going to happen.
Right. If he doesn't know the names of any other military equipment, tanks are the only thing he can put in the street, though, John.
That's true. That's true. Okay. Well, let's turn from the offense to the defense. So Trump, for the past few days, has been trying to reassure his fans that he was not, as the media reported, rushed to a bunker over the weekend because of the protests around the White House. He just went there coincidentally to inspect it. He was checking the drapes, I guess. Except it turns out that was not the case. Apparently, he was actually rushed there Friday evening, not during the day, Brian Kilmeade, but during the evening, after protesters began dismantling a temporary barricade outside the building, despite his claims that he was just inspecting it. So he did actually do that. That actually happened. But he has come up with a new idea, because the criticism from many people on social media calling Trump bunker boy now is that he fled from the White House down to a bunker, which he won't have to do anymore because he has decided to turn the entire White House into a bunker. Take a look at this. You're seeing deliveries of new fence installations going up to block off the other fences and barriers and barricades. They are forming a wall around the White House. I mean, I think we all sort of expected this would come at some point. What do you think?
And Mexico's paying for it too.
Now, are they? Yeah, I'm sure they'd probably be happy to in this case.
First of all, I look at this from afar, right? And I look at this president is so afraid of looking weak. And what this shows about the president is that there is great weakness there. I also feel like this is the reason the Democrats should hold a convention of some sort, because I think if 5 days later the Republicans are going to have a convention after the Democrats don't, they're going to point out the fear and the weakness on the part of Democrats for not going and having their convention because of this hoax of a disease. So in some way, shape, or form, this is how he likes to define things and define people. It's about Sleepy Joe. It's about Sleepy Jeb. It's or low energy Jeb. Mm-hmm. This is weakening the other side. Here he looks weak, and he has. I mean, he is the president who was taken to a bunker and has tried to convince people that he wasn't. There is this hunkering down and this bunkering down that's going on in the White House that really shows that there is a scared president here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder, like, to me, it seems like the cherry on top of the chaos cake that Donald Trump in office leads to chaos in every area, public health, the economy, everything. And him having to, perch on the barricades inside the new White Castle that we're going to have, right. Which, by the way, he would love to hole up in a White Castle. But anyway, I'd love every word of that. But anyway, do you think that Republicans will see it as we get to defend our man, like that he's being besieged? Now we need to help him. Could that be seen as strength? To me, it looks like incompetence leading to him huddling behind a wall. Will they see it differently?
Well, I think that the wall that exists of support for Trump is starting to show some fissures. So he's putting in another wall. I mean, if we want to push the symbolism a little bit, you have Republicans who have now started being slightly more vocal. They're not heroes for being this way at all. I'm not trying to make it that way. But it is worth noting that you have Republicans like Ben Sass, Lisa Murkowski, who said she's struggling as to whether or not to even support the president in 2020, understands and agrees with Mattis that it was a long time before people said that. So he has to fortify in some way if his main fortification, which is support in Congress, is starting to weaken. And I think obviously that's pushing this the metaphor a little bit, but it's really true. I think that it's very important to note that the president is scared of fortifications breaking on a border, in Congress, and in front of the White House.
Yeah, and really fast, I get what you're saying about the conventions, but the thing is, it would be incredibly dangerous, obviously.
Yeah,
And
I agree. It's August. I don't know everything about it, but everything I do know makes me agree with you 1,000%. But I'm just, I'm looking at the politics of it, right? I'm forgetting the health for a moment, but this is what I predict they will do. And this is why there has to be some kind of representation, whether it's not having everybody there, but, having your main people in one place spread apart with fewer guests and fewer delegates and voting remotely and
maybe
doing
a unified
something.
speaking venue or something like that.
It can't be a Zoom convention as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, like, I already know exactly how the news is going to go. The Republicans are going to cram into the Taj Mahal or something, I don't know. And then 3 weeks later, we're going to find out that 300 of them have coronavirus as a result of it. And
Right.
It won't matter because nothing matters. Like, every one of these events we've predicted would lead to people getting infected. We find out 3 weeks later they were infected, and then the world moves on because nothing matters.
Because nothing at all matters.
Yeah.
By the way, I should point out, when you said White Castle, you actually meant a White Castle. And I was thinking, I wouldn't mind being holed up in a White Castle. But I was thinking of the burger place.
No. So I was thinking of the burger place.
Oh, you were?
He
I
is
thought
a
you were talking
well-known.
All right, okay.
He's a lover of burgers, but he'd
No,
also
I-
love the fact that it is a white castle.
Right. Okay. That's fine.
Do they have a blonde castle? Anyway, let's read a few of these super chats. The Stoned Apostate says it does not go on in their world. Now I'm not sure what that's a reference to, but it could be anything with the elites.
But he's right, by the way. It's forget the elites with the right.
Yeah. JD Wilder says, I've had the pigs dislocate my arm and keep me in cuffs for 8 hours, destroyed my arm, and the pigs got away with it. Paul Sav says, the police force outside the White House remind me of when the Tory government dressed up the UK army as police to batter, assault, and arrest the striking miners in Scotland in the early 80s. Oh, wow.
I have to read about it. I don't know about that.
People pointed out that during the French protests, was it last year? Or the year before?
The French protests like every 3 weeks. So.
That's true. But there was, a lot of violence and stuff like that against those protesters as well.
It was for the education protests, I think. Probably.
Exactly. By the way, Michael, what do you think about all these unidentifiable? Apparently, they're with the Board of Corrections or whatever. They're like police. They're prison guards. But all these armored men on the streets of DC refusing to say who they're with.
Who they're with? I know it's not surprising.
It's The Handmaid's Tale. It's insane.
Yeah.
Like they could just be a militia for all we know.
Right, and who has deputized them? Yeah, they could be a militia because nobody is saying that they've deputized them. No agency has said that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
bizarre.
Okay, one more. Mr. Andy Rue says you can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Well, hopefully enough people will be unfooled in November.
Or as George W. Bush said, you can fool some of the people, you can fool, won't get fooled again.
Won't get fooled again. That one has stuck with me more than any other.
Yeah.
Nita says, I'll ask again, have you seen the pic of Tom Cotton sitting on a pile of Iraqi gold like the movie Three Kings? I have not. Michael, have you seen that?
I haven't. I don't think.
I haven't seen it, but thank you. And Hanny says, my parents watch Fox News. I had to show my mom videos of the police acting violent. She hadn't seen any.
Amazing.
It's just amazing. The alternate reality.
Yeah, and that's working. That's what's amazing about it.
Yeah, the only exception to how bad Fox is Tucker Carlson. He's a critical thinker, and he's a serious, responsible journalist. And everyone should be nice to him, and there should be awesome write-ups in the New York Times about him every 4 months. It's ridiculous how... Ugh.
And an entrepreneur.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Ugh. Okay, let's move on to other news. This year has already seen multiple extrajudicial murders of unarmed black individuals in the streets, rightly identified as lynchings. And in fact, there have been updates on some of those cases recently. Once again, there's been an attempt to outlaw this practice. But understand that since at least the year 1900, members of the House and Senate have tried to pass a law making lynching a federal crime. The bills were consistently blocked, shelved, or ignored. I saw one reference to at least 200 separate attempts to outlaw this practice, but there was always something to block it. Always something. And it turns out that right now there is something as well. Because while the House has already passed an anti-lynching legislation, which is waiting approval in the Senate, on Wednesday, Senator Rand Paul told reporters he has concerns about the bill, which he said might allow some minor altercations to be punishable as lynchings. He was quoted as saying, "Bruises could be considered lynching. That's a problem. To put someone in jail for 10 years for some kind of altercation." And so he's just worried about the extent of the legislation. That's why he is the lone person apparently standing to stop this from finally becoming outlawed.
Yeah, there's a museum now in Montgomery, Alabama, that Brian Stevenson with the Equal Justice Initiative opened. It's a museum of lynching, and they chronicle every lynched man or woman and child in American history there. And it is an extraordinarily moving experience. There's nobody there who's there with a bruise. There's nobody there who is there because there was some sort of red tape that they got through to be in the Museum of Lynching. I think it's like pornography when Chief Justice, I think it was Potter Stewart, but I'm probably wrong, said that he doesn't know it. He knows it when he sees it, but he can't define it. You can define lynching. It's pretty clear what it is. And Rand Paul is so wrong on this. And he's so wrong at a time where being wrong on this is so vitally egregious. It's just incredible that he's continuing this charade.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, look, he's the sort of, I'll just say, he's the sort of a-hole who would do this at any time. But it certainly seems like an extra level to do it now, to say, no, we're not going to finally, after far more than a century, make good on this. Now, I have problems with the language. And so, you know what? We just don't have time. And as of right now,
he's not even a lawyer, by the way. He's an eye doctor, right? He's not even a lawyer. He doesn't have the standing to say, well, there's some legal parts of this. We don't want to misconstrue a bruise here. This isn't foreign aid to Bulgaria without some quid pro quo. This is about anti-lynching. It's pretty clear the spirit of this bill. It's so important that this thing pass.
Yeah, and it might be one thing if it was like the person who was holding it up over a particular language thing was someone who had a long reputation and credibility built on concern around this issue. He's not that individual. And right now, if he holds it up, right now, in order for the Senate to quickly pass the House bill, they would need to agree to it unanimously and without offering amendments, which he's pushing for. Adding an amendment would require the full vote of the Senate. It would mean that the bill would have to be sent back to the House for additional consideration, a move that would delay the passing of the bill because the House is currently out of session. Now, we've been perfectly fine delaying it for over a century. Seems like we could finally stop that. And also, and look, that obviously makes him look bad, because if he delays it and then it finally gets sent, we'll have to wait for the House to come back. But the House is out. That's insanity. I mean, even if there weren't these protests going on, they're gonna wait weeks and weeks before taking up the next coronavirus relief bill. 40 million people are still out of work. 1,000 people are dying every day. And the House, like, we can't expect anything out of Mitch McConnell. But the House, like, Nancy Pelosi seems perfectly happy to just go and fundraise a little bit. Maybe give a little speech, hold up a Bible, a little viral moment to sting Trump. They should be providing a counterpoint to the lack of leadership from the White House and from the Senate. And they're not doing that.
Yeah. I'm going to explain it. This is not a defensive. This is an explanation of it. Very often you have moments in politics, which election years are all about politics, where you just let the other side, decompose. And I think that that's what they see happening when you see the poll numbers, when you see the reaction to the president from within his own party, and you just let the fire burn on that side. I agree. Obviously, more should be being done. The members of Congress that I've spoken to, all of whom were Democrats over the past week, seem pretty confident that when they get back in July, they're going to be able to have a whole lot of meat to go after this administration and the Senate on. It's a tactic. It's not one that I necessarily agree with, or certainly you or most of our audience would, but it's certainly a tactic, and they think it's going to work politically. That's all they care about this year, is getting him out.
Yeah. We'll see what's left of the country by the time he is gotten rid of, hopefully. I totally agree with your read of the politics. I'm 100% sure that that's what they're doing. I think that that's Biden's strategy too, although Biden has been more outspoken than Schumer or Pelosi recently. But
Well,
the
Schumer
thing
and
is,
Pelosi did write a letter reacting to what the president said the other day. But those are statements; they're not actions, and I don't know what
yeah.
actions they can take. Everything that's going on right now is really governors and mayors and
Mhm.
chiefs of police for the most part.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, let's do our last story, a little bit of an ad, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about how November is looking just briefly. The Lincoln Project, as Jared Jackson pointed out on Twitter, is just home run after home run. Awful people probably disagree with them on everything, but their ads are something. Take a look at this.
When Donald Trump came out of hiding this week, he didn't do it to bring us together or heal the nation. He wasn't there to offer words of calm and comfort. Instead, he became what we always feared, evoked the worst of our past, threatened our governors and states. He ordered our own soldiers who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan to flood the streets, instructing them to turn against Americans, used churches and the Holy Bible as political props. He didn't invoke the Lord to give us wisdom, but to boost his polls. Ordered an attack on unarmed protesters, using gas, rubber bullets, and flash grenades. Washington transformed into a war zone for this coward. This is a time for choosing. America or Trump?
Okay, Michael. So we've talked about a few of their ads. They're very talented at getting under the skin of the Republicans they target. And while obviously that's a sort of general argument against Donald Trump and where he's led America, it also is honing in on a few of the things that we know has really angered him recently. The coverage of the fact that he was, in the bunker. They call him a coward. They talk about him coming out of hiding. It seems very well suited to anger him at the very least.
Yeah, not to mention the subtlety of calling themselves the Lincoln Project, taking Lincoln away from the Republicans who try and use it, including the president. The party of Lincoln, Mike Pence always refers to the party of Lincoln. And now the Lincoln Project is saying, guess what? Abe is not, or Donald's not Abe. This is an effective set of ads, and it'll have a cumulative effect of some kind because so many Republicans are behind it and are seeing it. And that with also the sort of what they hope to be a bipartisan group of former presidents lined up around ads like this is going to be an important part of the optics of 2020. Yeah.
And by the way, I can see from the comments that most of the people watching this think, again, it was a very effective ad. There's this group. There's also is it Republican Voters Against Trump or something like that? They had an ad. It was like American Massacre or something like that a day or two ago. And it is weird that the vast majority of the most emotionally resonant ads coming out are made by Republicans attacking Donald Trump. I don't know why the Democrats seem to be having so much trouble matching that. Joe Biden has had some good ads. There's, from my point of view, needless fear-mongering about China in there. He seems to think he needs to appeal to people who feel like we're being too soft on China. So him and Trump are now sort of competing on that. I don't like that necessarily. But effective ad. What I'm curious about is, I've been looking at recent polling. I know that you're familiar with it. We've seen that in the public polls over the past few months, the gap, at least right now, between Biden and him has been growing up to 8 or 10 points, 11 points in one poll that I saw. So that's the public polling. In response to that, Trump said that he has polls that show him winning, but apparently he doesn't, because according to reporting in private polling conducted by his campaign, the president is well behind Mr. Biden. Those are in his, actually. So
right. Internal polling always favors the internal poller, right? Mm-hmm. So every candidate from every office who has enough money to poll and do their internal polling will always give you numbers that are better than the ones that come out in the public polls. It helps the campaign. It helps the candidate. That Donald Trump is talking about this in such a way as, or his people are talking about it in such a way as their internal polling has him in a precarious place. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I try not to focus on any of these too much because it's still 5 months, and you never know if the polls can move that far just over the past 2 months. They can theoretically move back. Although, I did see, I think it was Dave Weigel had tweeted out For the last 4 presidential elections, he had the Real Clear Politics polling lead at this point, the same point. And for 2008, 2012, 2016, it was right around 1.5 points for the Democrat. And I think Biden was up by 8.1 points. So a pretty significant gap, even though Trump is the incumbent president. There's the whole rally around the flag thing. The economy had been perceived to be doing well up until just a couple of months ago. So it seems impossible to say exactly how this is going to go, but this is certainly nothing about this is what Donald Trump was hoping 2020 would look like.
No, and at a time when you would rally around the flag, which is at a time of national crisis, which predating George Floyd during Corona, he didn't get. He got a zero sustained rally around the flag. People did not come and rally around the president after a while, and that was really hurtful to their chances. The other part of it is forgetting the poll numbers. Where do you go if you're Donald Trump? What states do you campaign in? Now he's down farther by more in Wisconsin than even in Arizona. Do you go to Arizona where the Senate campaign's up by 13, Mark Kelly on top of Martha McSally, or do you go to Wisconsin and try and win that back? Are you precarious enough in Ohio and Florida that you have to camp out there constantly and then lose Wisconsin and Arizona? It's, if you're running Trump's campaign, that's what becomes difficult. Where do you go? Where are those votes? Where are those states? And they're fewer now for Donald Trump to choose from with only 5 months left.
Yeah, he seems, from what I've seen generally in, a sampling of swing states, the gap generally seems to be smaller, which is helpful. But he apparently is doing renewed spending in Ohio. I've seen some indication that they're going to be doing some work in Georgia, which is not what they expected. And, you never know about these polls, but there was just another Texas poll, I think yesterday, that had him up by 1 over Biden in Texas. And I think we all agree that if Texas went blue, then that's just, pack it up.
Well, that's just it, John. And if you're Donald Trump and you know you're going to lose Michigan and Pennsylvania, that means you've got to go to some other state where you have a chance. Early in the year, before all of this happened, at the end of last year, they were talking about New Mexico and Oregon as places they would spend to try and make up for Michigan and Pennsylvania, try and narrow the gap a little bit. Those are states that are so far off the charts for the president right now that they have to go into these swing states just to hang on to them, and they have to pick something else up. There's nothing the president at this point in time has a chance of picking up, of flipping. So he's got to hold on to the states like Ohio and to the fact that, like you just said, that they're considering even spending $1 in Georgia tells you exactly where they are now.
Yeah, I mean, we had that 2018 race there that was so close. And on the whole, there's still the possibility that he could just choose a crisis and take it seriously. Just, you have your pick of several crises. With the whole rally around the flag thing, if he had gone against his worst instincts with coronavirus and had taken it seriously, I think he'd be a lock. There'd be no way to beat him, I think. That if he was seen as being a responsible leader, but he wasn't. And now with this, he has another chance to rally around the flag. But what he's decided to do is, rather than unifying and bringing the sides together, even in a shallow way, even in a way that's blatantly opportunistic, he's not doing that. He's just deploying the military, which means that if, you might feel as a regular American, well, aren't I supposed to support the military or the cops? But look at what you are being forced to sign on to do that now. You're going to have video coming out every day or two of beatings and tear gassing and all of that. You're going to have to be okay with that to rally around the flag this time. And back in the 60s, 70s, easy. A lot of white Americans are perfectly happy to do that. I'm sure many white conservatives are still fine to do that. But is that an electoral majority? I hope not, at the very least.
Yeah, I hope not too. And it's all hypothetical. And so too is your theory that if he had handled this properly, the point is he doesn't handle Corona properly, and he doesn't handle any crisis in a presidential manner. Had he done so, I don't think he would have been a lock. I just think it would have been closer in swing states. I think before we knew about Corona, I didn't think he was a lock at all. So I think all of it combined with a bad economy makes it a very difficult place for a president to run.
Yeah. Well, Michael, as always, I want to thank you for joining us and talking through news. Always appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Thank you, and talk to you soon.
Bye.
And everyone at home, let's see what you've all been saying about the news. Gina says Gates can wear the badge next to his booking number, referring to his badge of honor and the fact that he had been arrested, I think, for a DUI, I think. Aaron says no regrets using $2 to say Matt Gaetz is a tool. You can say it for free, too. He is. Chubtoad says, can we get a Mattis versus Cotton cage match? That's good. Sinful Solutions says, Matt Gaetz is a tool. Best way I could spend $2. Feel free, send in a super chat for $2 to just say Matt Gaetz is a tool. It can't be said enough. Gary says, hey John, I love TDR. There are so many demonstrations going on over here in Europe in support of what's happening in America at the moment. Stay strong. Sending you all positive thought from Ireland. Thank you, Gary. I actually tweeted last night asking for people to send video footage from these international demonstrations, and I'm thinking about possibly making a little mashup to play on the show tomorrow, because it's been from cities everywhere, and I think we could use a little bit of that. But thank you. From Ireland. Kurt says, take cops' pensions and this stops. Go vegan, mofos. Mixed message there, but you could afford a lot of fake meat with those pensions. Zane says, where can we read that op-ed, John? I want to read. Well, we updated it just like a week ago, and we're submitting it to other places. I haven't seen what's going to happen with that. Obviously, I've been taken up by the change in the news. But maybe someday. The Stone says they can close their eyes because it does not happen to their world. The wealthy live on a different planet, totally disconnected from the rest of us. Yes. And Meghan McCain, you remember we did the story a couple days ago about her talking about how her neighborhood was a war zone. And then someone from the Samantha Bee show said that she lives in the same building as Meghan McCain and it's perfectly fine there. We also found out the day after that she's not even there. She's not in New York City. She was just pretending that she was. So yeah, they do live in a different world. A different zip code, a different economic class, and sometimes they're not even there. Kurt says, stop shielding cops from civil liability. That could be a part of it as well. Nainer says, Trump wants a civil war. November can't come soon enough. Be smart and stay safe out there, people. 100%. Thank you. Anita says, there will be a tank in D.C. Saturday. Guarantee it. That's what I'm worried about. Zane says, SCOTUS shielded cops from civil liability for 50 years. True. Chris says, I was thinking of myself in front of a tank. It's going to happen. James says, Trump finally built his wall. He must be very happy. And it is painted black, it turns out, like he wanted. BK says, is Mexico going to pay for that wall too? No word yet, but we're going to get Ken Klippenstein on it. Feisty says, I can't be the only one being kept up at night by anxiety stemming from the crumbling of our democracy. No, just me? Okay. I guarantee, Feisty, it is not just you. Let's see. Django says, what's next? A moat with alligators, spikes, knee shooting? We need to start pushing out politicians to remove Trump from office before November. Yep, all things that he has said that he's wanted. Knowledge Gizmo says, I'm going to say what everyone's thinking. If protests aren't violent, America isn't paying attention. Well, I agree. If it had just been a few small, kumbaya type protests, they would ignore it. They're ignoring these, at least the content, but I do agree with you. Franklin says, this might make you sigh. 420 them all, get them high. It's hard to trade the punchies when busy curing the munchies. Thank you, Franklin. A Spooky Fox says, do you think Trump peed his diaper in his bunker? Maybe that's what he was inspecting. I don't know. You're in the White House. You're surrounded by soldiers. How are you so scared? I don't understand. That's who he is. It is just a hot molten core of primal fear at everything. Rob Shively says, I asked for a refund and was refused. To that end, I will continue to send these messages until I get my $5 back. That's is it a refund for a super chat? Well, thank you. Thank you for that $5. You're not getting that back either. But thank you, Rob. Ryan says, given the establishment block progressives from POTUS in multiple ways, would there be more focus on ousting senators in terms of donating money? Well, I mean, we've profiled several primary challengers in Senate races against incumbent Democrats. I think that would be great. I mean, we've had great, new people added into the House recently. We could use those in the Senate as well. I want a Senate squad. That would be great. Little Yumper says, enough of the bad apples argument. There shouldn't be any bad apples in this position, especially if it deals with public safety, reform to hiring process, as well as the other policies. Agreed, Little Yumper. Gilsbert says, from bathtub in the Netherlands, go TYT. That was very specific, but thank you, Netherlands. Jerf says, $5 that Betsy DeVos's brother is commanding the unmarked troops in Washington. Chubtoad says, Matt Gaetz is a tool. So apparently some people did take me up on it. Let's see. Kathy says gets a tool. Karanik says Matt Gaetz is a tool and conformity can be fun. Thank you. Nickelodeon said stop insulting tools, which is a good point. And Steve says Matt Gaetz is a tool. Joe Dane, thank you very much. Nikki says, do you think any of the brutal cops will be charged? Some have, actually. Relatively early on, there was a little bit of that. 1 in 1,000, but some. Matai says, can we turn Washington into a prison with those walls? Start adding to it. And God only knows, if they ever breach those, what he will build. Lauren says, I'm so happy you exist. How can I send you video from the protests? I've participated here in Texas. Keep up the good work. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Love you. Thank you, Lauren. You can do that through Twitter DM link, is one way that people have sent me footage in the past. Chad says, keep sending super chats so John stays on the air longer. Lol. No, there is a limit. But I do appreciate all of the support. Especially Patrick, who says Matt Gaetz is a tool. And Kurtz, who says Trump supporters are wimps. They won't even pay their taxes. Think they'll risk death and losing their boats. Now Eric Prince employees, get your guns. And the Imperial, thank you. Thank you to everyone. Whether you're super chatting, commenting, tweeting about my Sharona or otherwise. Or sending messages on Twitch. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for joining us throughout the show. Tomorrow, Brett is going to be joining me. We are, of course, going to be choosing a garbage person. You could head over to the community tab on the TDR YouTube channel to participate in that vote, which I think will be free of all of the above. So we're going to really drill down this time. But anyway, go have fun with that. And thank you for joining us. See you tomorrow.